Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar brought to you by the Nazarian Center for Israel Studies at UCLA. I'm Dov Waxman, the director of the Nazarian Center and the Rosalinde and Arthur Gilbert Foundation Chair of Israel Studies at UCLA. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, as I'm sure we all know, is one of the most contentious issues on college and university campuses in the United States and elsewhere. Campus debate about the conflict can be often heated and acrimonious. Pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian students have sometimes been harassed, intimidated, and threatened. Both sides accuse the other of trying to censor and silence them. Divestment resolutions proposed by students supporting the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement targeting Israel have generated intense controversy on and off campus and fueled concerns that campuses are becoming hotbeds of anti-Israel sentiment and even anti-Semitism. A new book, The Conflict Over the Conflict, the Israel-Palestine Campus Debate, examines why the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has become such a divisive and toxic issue on campus and what can be done about it. Its author is Kenneth S, the director of the Bard Center for the Study of Hate at Bard College. An award-winning author and attorney, he was the American Jewish Committee's expert on anti-Semitism for 25 years, and also the lead drafter of the International Holocaust Remembrance Association's working definition of anti-Semitism. I'm delighted that Ken is joining us today to talk about his new book. I'm also delighted that we'll be having Miriam Elman, the executive director of the Academic Engagement Network, a national faculty organization devoted to opposing efforts to delegitimize Israel and countering anti-Semitism. She'll be joining us to discuss Ken's book. She's currently on leave from her role as an associate professor of political science in Syracuse University's Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs, the author of numerous books, journal articles, and government reports on topics related to international and national security, religion in the Middle East, and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So I'd like to welcome both of them to this webinar and thank them for joining us. And to all our audience out there, all around the world, you're joining us from many, many different countries. I'd like to encourage you all to send in your questions using the Q&A function. We'll leave plenty of time for questions. And in particular, for those students out there, I want to particularly encourage students, whether you're students at UCLA or anywhere else, to send us your questions so we can make sure that your voices are heard in this discussion. So without any further ado, let me now welcome and turn over to Ken Stern.
Thank you, Dov, for that very delightful and very overly generous introduction. And I appreciate the opportunity to be speaking with you and the people that you've collected around your center today. And Miriam, it's an absolute delight to be part. I'm honored that you want to respond and talk about my book. I'm a fan of your work. And so I'm just sorry that we can't all be there together in person. So what I'm proposed to do, Dov asked me to spend about a half hour or so talking about the book. I am going to, focus on the issues and why they are so difficult. How do we think about the conflict? How do we approach it on campus? And how to have rational discussions about it? Why it's so difficult? And in the Q&A period, I'm happy to answer questions wherever anybody wants to go. So I'm going to start off talking about some of my history, which is how, really sort of illuminate some of the principles and best practices and how I've, come across those over the years. And I want to begin at the same place where the book begins, Spokane, Washington. Some of you who are old enough to remember will recall a group called the Aryan Nations, which was a hotbed of neo-Nazi activity in the United States, but it was sort of the center of a lot of the problems that we were seeing around the country. In the 80s and 90s in particular, members included a group that killed a Jewish talk show host in Denver by the name of Alan Berg. A member named Buford Furrow shot up the Jewish Community Center in LA in 1999. It pipe bombed a parish priest who was speaking out against neo-Nazism. I was friends with a rabbi there who was telling me things that didn't get into the press, like if you were Jewish and you found Hanukkah wrapped someplace, the chances are you'd find a razor blade put inside. It was a clear and present danger to a lot of people in the community and beyond. And it was finally shut down in 2001 when the Southern Poverty Law Center and a local attorney who's a hero of mine named Norm Gissel worked to bring a lawsuit to shut it down. But part of the reason why the suit was successful and the pushback was successful is during that period of time, the Jewish community and the local peace and justice groups were actively working together. And even after the group was disbanded in 2001, the danger from white supremacy there to the community was still very obvious. There was a remote controlled pipe bomb put along the route of the Martin Luther King Day parade with fishing weights soaked in rat poison, which was an anticoagulant. Thank God it didn't go off. If you went to Spokane, I did a couple of years ago, you still see white supremacist posters around and activity. But the challenge was that the Jewish community and the peace and justice group had not spoken to each other, had not worked together for 8 years. The background to that is the Peace and Justice Group had a static page on its website that promoted the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement against Israel. The Jewish community was calling them anti-Semites. And despite the fact that somebody may be living across the street with intent of murdering local people, they could not communicate anymore, which if you think about it rationally is nuts. These folks were not going to solve the Israel-Palestine conflict, but they could do something to affect their local community. So that's where the book starts. I'll come back to that at the end. I also talk some in the book about my experience growing up in New York in the 50s and 60s. As a practical matter, I didn't, think of Israel much. I did during the 67 war and the 73 war, but I was focused on the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement. I moved out to Oregon to go to law school and then started to practice in Portland. And I was very much among the, progressive community there. I was honored to be asked to represent one of the co-founders of the American Indian movement. I represented the homeless. I represented some of the last Vietnam era protesters. So that was part of my community, part of my political and personal community. Portland then, like now, also had a reactionary community. There was a group called the Posse Comitatus that was the precursor to the militia movement of the 90s. And I used to run into these fine fellows around the courthouse. I used to hand out leaflets talking about Jewish conspiracy and fraudulent quotes from Benjamin Franklin and George Washington talking about letting Jews among you is a cancer. So Portland had both of those things. But then flip forward a couple years, 82, the Lebanon War happens. And I thought it was ill-advised and I joined the protest. But to my chagrin, I started seeing some of the same, conspiracy theories about Jews controlling the media, Jews controlling government from some of the folks in my progressive community. And I started speaking out about that. And the pushback that I got was very intense. It was, why are you sacrificing the fight for Palestinian folks? And that wasn't what I was doing. I was raising issues about anti-Semitism. So I was struggling at that time. I was writing things. I think I was just convincing myself and not anybody else. But that got me to see that there was a problem that was broader in its political scope. Flip forward a few more years. As Dov mentioned, I was the AJC's expert on anti-Semitism from 1989 to 2014. And one of the first projects I had at AJC was to come up with a manual about how do you deal with bigotry on campus, which was a big deal then as it is now. And one of the things became very clear to me from talking to a lot of folks and going to archives and getting as much information as I could is that one cannot tackle anti-Semitism alone on a campus. If you had to really talk about what the campus should be as opposed to special protections for any group, there's a person I quote in the book a few years later that I met named Michael Brooks, a sort of famous Hillel director from the University of Michigan, who used to quip, if you make it about Jews, you lose. And he meant by that, you have to talk about what the university should be. And if you come up with things that will address bigotry on campus, Jews will benefit from that as well. So the first thing I did in consultation with a lot of college presidents, that was one of the wonderful things about AJC at the time, we were able to bring a bunch of college presidents to say, how do you understand this? What don't we know? What should we be looking at? And came up with a manual to train. I trained a couple of hundred college presidents about how do you deal with bigotry on campus. And those who remember the debate at that time, the debate was, let's have hate speech codes. That ought to be the way that we deal with bigotry on campus. And it became very clear from working with these college presidents that this was absolutely the worst thing to do. And some of the debates about these, I mean, you have to appreciate the academics that went into this. The Michigan one was my favorite. It was like, okay, we have a special interest in a classroom. It's different than a cafeteria. It's different than a dorm, and it's different than a public place. So the students there did what I would have done if they came up with a hate speech policy like that, is to find the intersection and write free speech zone in chalk. You know, and you're thinking at 2 o'clock in the morning, somebody's going to think, am I here? Am I there? You know, so it was nutsy, right? But legally, none of these codes was upheld. And the more I looked into them, the more I became convinced that they were black holes. They stopped the discussion of things that university could do, looking at teaching, looking at training, looking at surveys. There were a whole panoply of things that you could do, some of which I would think were more labor intensive and probably more costly, but it's a lot easier to say, thou shalt not say certain things. And you know, all those other things disappear. So one of the lessons I learned early on from being fortunate to work with these college presidents and to speak a lot about this is that if you're going to deal with any issue, anti-Semitism, bigotry of any type, anti-Israel stuff, you have to promote free speech and academic freedom. If you're going to do something that's going to sacrifice those principles, it's going to backfire. You have to say, this is what the university should be about, and how do we make it better to address these issues? And I'll give you a couple of examples. Let me fast forward a little bit to 2000. Okay, you remember the Intifada and the Durban conference that was really an orgy of anti-Semitism. And right after that, in 2002, actually this month, February in 2002, if I remember correctly, you started seeing petitions on campus, some campuses that talked about divestment from Israel. Now, let me pause for a second and just put this in some perspective, and then I'll go back to 2002. So this is 19 years. We've had no campus divest, 19 years. Most campuses, Israel is not an issue. There are about 4,000 campuses in the US. The last year that I had data for, 149 had anti-Israel programs. And pro-Israel programs outnumber anti-Israel programs uniformly 2 to 1. There have been disruptions over the years, but the data from 2010 to 2019 is that there were 117 disruptions and all but 19 programs were able to be completed. And these were on 12 campuses. So there are problems. One campus is too many to see those things, but it's not as ubiquitous as people talk about. So let me flip back to 2002. We started seeing these divestment petitions. There was an attack on a Hillel building at Berkeley. There was a real riot at Concordia in Canada. And so I started working with some of these presidents that we had collected around AJC and what to do. So we put out a statement that over 400 college presidents signed, which was not an easy thing to get 400 college presidents to agree on the text of anything. But what it basically did was it said our role on a campus is to make sure that harassment and intimidation does not exist. That is our role. We are guaranteeing that. In other words, so it responded to some of these attacks, including anti-Zionist attacks, and the ad used the word Zionist in it, precisely because some of these were anti-Zionist attacks, to talk about free speech and academic freedom. Flip forward 5 more years. 2007, some of you may recall there was a motion passed by the University and College Union in the UK to advance an academic boycott of Israel. What was the immediate reaction in the United States? Some groups were saying, well, if they're going to boycott Israelis, we should boycott British academics. And there were a bunch of us who started calling and saying, no, you're giving away the main argument on top of everything else. You know, you're changing it from academic boycotts, should never be appropriate. We talk about on the Academy about ideas and nationality of people who promote them. Does not matter to looking at the quality of the ideas. You're changing the debate to who should be boycotted. You don't want to do that. So I worked with Lee Bollinger, the president of Columbia, and I tell more detail in the book about the story behind it. But he put out this powerful statement that we also got over 400 college presidents to sign on to, and was also a New York Times ad. And he basically said not only was this a bad idea, what this union in the UK was doing, but that if they were intent on dividing the academic community worldwide to Israelis who should be boycotted and everyone else, count us as Israeli too. So that affirmed academic freedom. It gave a way of supporting it, and that again was I think it actually helped stop this push for academic boycotts until at least 2013. So those are the cornerstone principles that I'd like people to come away with. It may feel good to try to beat up the other side, but if you're doing something that doesn't promote academic freedom, that's a problem. You will not find an ad of 400 college presidents now saying, please take the working definition of anti-Semitism and apply it from government or elsewhere to our campuses. And there's a reason why you won't, because as you'll hear, there's some implications for academic freedom there too. So let me talk a little bit about the definition. I'm sure it's in the news. I'm sure there'll be questions about it. I am going to focus mostly on the campus as opposed to its other applications, and there are appropriate other uses for it, which I'm happy to go into the Q&A. But just to give you a quick history leading to the executive order and the definition. So I was mentioning the Intifada, and there were attacks on Jews in Europe, particularly in Western Europe, that started after the Intifada began. And there was a group called the EUMC that had it was a European monitoring center group that's now subsumed in the Fundamental Rights Agency of the EU, but it had as its main goal or the data collection, the reports on anti-Semitism, racism, and so forth. So it had a report that had a problem, was suppressed, it was leaked. It did its own report, which was actually pretty good in 2004, looking at the level of anti-Semitism across Europe. But it came across a problem. One problem was that there was no common definition. So the data collectors in all these different countries didn't have a common frame of reference. So they wanted to make sure that people were looking at the same thing. The second thing is they said, well, as a placeholder, we're going to talk about anti-Semitism as a series of stereotypes about Jews. Aside from the fact that I find that intellectually backward, it's a reflection of what anti-Semitism is, there was a subtext to this, is what do you do if a Jew on the streets of Paris or London is beaten up as a substitute for an Israeli? And they said, well, if the person had these attitudes, transform them to Israelis and back to this poor person in front of them, that's anti-Semitism. But if they were upset at an Israeli policy and beat up the same person, it's lamentable, but shouldn't be counted. And I thought that was as nutty as saying that somebody who was, in the South in the 50s, who was strung up because somebody thought blacks were shiftless and lazy, that's racism. But if they, lynched the same guy because they were upset at Congress passing a civil rights law, that shouldn't be counted. So that was nuts. So it so happened that the director of the EUMC was coming to an American Jewish Committee annual meeting. And a couple of weeks beforehand, there was a Montreal Jewish day school that was firebombed in retaliation for Israel's assassination of a Hamas leader. Not anti-Semitism, according to the definition they were using. So we started working. My colleague Andy Baker did the politicking. I began drafting. I was the lead drafter of the definition that ultimately appeared. But the idea was primarily, and again, I could talk about the other uses, but primarily to give these guideposts for bean counters and what to include and what not to include. And there were some examples about Israel included in there as well. And I thought it was important to do that. Things like holding all Jews collectively responsible for the actions of Israel, Nazi equivalents, and some things that dealt with, a different way of phrasing anti-Zionism, denying Jews their right to self-determination. And the point was never to label anybody an anti-Semite. It was to collect data and to see temperature over time and across borders, because we were seeing on the ground that Jews were being attacked. The more of the sort of the verbiage that was reflected in some of those examples was in the public domain. It was almost the same chart as the attacks on Jews. So that's why it was relevant to keep track of that, not to define certain things as anti-Semitism or not in terms of individuals and so. So that, was happened, it got passed, it was contentious, it was, a working definition. And then I started seeing in 2010 some problems with how it was being, in my view, abused. There was in the United States, there's a Department of Education put out what's called a Dear Colleague letter in 2010 about something called Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, in educational settings, prohibited pervasive and harassment, intimidation, and discrimination on race and some other categories, but didn't include religion. So the 2010 letter said, we're going to include Jews and Sikhs and Muslims as ethnicities, which I thought was great. I mean, I think, you don't need it's a matter of policy. You shouldn't need a law that says colleges should stop harassment of students and intimidation and discrimination. But I thought it was great that it gave that tool. And actually, I successfully was a complainant for a group of high school students outside of Binghamton, New York, where there was a Kick It Jew Day and the school didn't do anything. So it was a great tool because in theory, an educational district can lose all its funding. But then what started happening was that we started seeing these Title VI cases being brought, some of which included allegations of actions that were problematic, but they were replete with examples of protected speech. Things like Title VI violation because of this campus, there was a program about the occupation, or texts that were ambiguously one-sided and anti-Israel, and in the complainant's view were is anti-Semitic by the definition. Instructors had listed their bias, it reflected their bias online, and that was discriminatory against students who had a different view about Israel. A program Understanding Gaza was one-sided and threatened Jewish students to feel emotionally and intellectually threatened. A program on Arabs and the Holocaust, claiming that the creation of Israel was a tragedy for Palestinian Arabs. Films, speakers, so forth. That's all, speech. That's all teaching. That's all academic freedom. I might disagree with some of and I probably did disagree and do disagree with a lot of the things that were being promoted, but that's part of what an academy should be. So the lawsuits failed. Then they tried to get the University of California to adopt the definition. That failed. Then they tried legislation and that failed. And then they had the executive order that says in the context of Title VI, you have to consider the definition. It was interesting when I testified against the legislation. On one side were the Jewish groups, the mainstream Jewish groups and right-wing Jewish groups, and Christians United for Israel. And on the opposing the legislation were Jewish studies professors, including the head of the Association for Jewish Studies and the president of America, PEN America. So, that reflects the challenge. I'm less concerned about the lawsuits in individual cases than about, as I testified then, about the chilling effect that this is saying you may get sued if you allow this type of speech and at least don't answer it. And that's why the Jewish studies professors were concerned, because there were going to be people hunting if they assigned the wrong person or said the wrong thing or invited the wrong speaker to give a variety of perspectives. That was going to potentially be an opening for people for hunting speech. And if you look at where it has been applied, look at the UK, and it's troubling to me. There was at least a couple of instances where Israel Apartheid Week, and I'm no great fan of Israel Apartheid Week, but the definition was applied to say you can't have it. And the Simon Wiesenthal Center put out a press release saying, basically, isn't this great? No campus should apply the definition every place. There was a Columbia University professor, graduate who's now teaching there, who wrote something that I disagreed with, but they said what she wrote violated the definition. And there was an inquiry into her fitness that struck me as McCarthy-like. And more recently, there have been debates in the UK because the education minister there basically threatened the funding of schools that don't adopt the definition. And that's a problem. So let me talk a little bit about why I think this is some of the other reasons why I think this is so challenging. some of what's being propelled here, both within the UK most recently, and some of the proponents here of pushing the definition on campus, is the idea you keep hearing that Jewish students need to be protected from hearing such expressions, that there's some fragility there. I don't see that. I don't believe it. And I think that's a disservice to the campus. Obviously, students should not be harassed or bullied or intimidated. And we've all, at least I hope we've spoken out when that does happen, and it does happen. But that's a question of harassment and bullying. It's not a question of hearing things that are quite disturbing. I argue in the book that a campus ought to be a place where students are disturbed by ideas. I have two kids in their 20s. I spent a lot of money on their college education. If they weren't disturbed by ideas, I don't know why I spent that money. The idea is to go through college and figure out how you deal with disturbing ideas and what you think about them. It's not to promote groupthink, it's to have individual agency. So that's one dynamic. The second is what I put in my book, in the first real chapter, is from my day job, from hate studies, why we're so susceptible to seeing the world in a us versus them dynamic, especially when there's a perception of conflict. And again, I have a whole chapter there, but basically there's a lot of social science that shows that people, especially when their identity is tethered to an issue of perceived social justice or injustice, crave certainty, want to see things in black and white. I quote Jonathan Haidt, who's an inspiring social psychologist, who talks about when people see things in purely moralistic terms, morality both binds people together, like in a tribe, and blinds them to other things. Symbols become important. You see some of the debates we've had about Confederate flags and Confederate statues, and on the campus, the Israeli flag. There are people that will tear it down, and there are Jewish students who are pro-Israel who will, wrap themselves in it. And I think to a degree, we're seeing some of the debate over symbols happening with the debate over the definition today too. So the chapter takes a deep dive into how we think and how we feel, and it has replete examples of each side basically demonizing the other and calling each other a Nazi. And you can't have a discussion with a Nazi, and that's the point. The campus ought to be a place for discussions, but the temptation is to vilify the other. So, and that's the irony, in the sense that the campus really ought to be the perfect place to have these difficult discussions, to try to stop censoring each other, to feeling good about shouting down the other side or stopping the other side or intimidating or chilling the other side. I complain in the book about pro-Palestinian students disrupting speeches and academic boycotts, which to me are the worst stain on anything one could do in the academy. And on the pro-Israel side, by trying to pressure phone calls, emails about particular professors, Canary Mission, which is trying to blacklist students who should have the right to be wrong and not worry about if they're going to get employed later on, and particularly by laws. As a lawyer, the use of laws worry me. So what do we do? So I have a chapter in the book that explains a lot of it, but I want to talk about, read you one short section that underscores that I think the major thing to do is to embrace and talk about the complexity. So here's a short couplet. So I talk about, I say, consider again the claim that Israelis are settler colonialists. On July 4th, 2018, the Palestinian Campaign for the Academic and Cultural Boycott of Israel wrote to the Iroquois Confederacy, Native nations from New York and Canada, urging them to boycott the World Championship of Lacrosse, a game natives invented and that Iroquois introduced to early American settlers, a game they continue to excel at and that is important to their culture. The request stated in part, as indigenous peoples, we have seen our traditional lands colonized, our people ethnically cleansed and massacred by colonial settlers. This year marks 70 years of Israeli dispossession of Palestinians, which began with what we call the Nakba, or catastrophe. In the years surrounding Israel's establishment, our homeland in 1948, pre- and post-state Israeli forces premeditatively drove out the majority of the indigenous people of Palestine and destroyed more than 500 of our villages. Then I write, contrast this language with the passage of an essay by Judea Pearl, a noted academic and father of Daniel Pearl, the Wall Street Journal reporter who was beheaded by terrorists in Pakistan in 2002. It is not surprising, Pearl wrote, that misrepresenting Israel as a white settler colonialist society has become a cornerstone of BDS ideology and propaganda. He asked those who read such comments to ask themselves if they could recall any of the following. One case of white settlers moving into a country they perceived to be the birthplace of their history. One case of white settlers speaking a language spoken in the land before the language spoken by its contemporary residents. One case of settlers whose holidays commemorated historical events in the land to which they moved, not the lands from which they came. One case of settlers who did not name towns like New York, New Amsterdam, and New Wales. Israeli towns are not named New Warsaw, New Berlin, and New Baghdad, but after names by which those towns were known in ancient times. One case of settlers who narrated their homecoming journey for 80 generations in poetry, prose, lore, and daily prayers. Then I write, the reality is that Israel isn't like settler colonial states in many ways, but in other ways it is. Proponents on each side seem blind to the complexities, choosing to highlight either the differences or similarities, depending on which better suits their black, white, good, bad, us, them argument, and which makes them feel more certain. As scholar Seth Azinska says, real history is the ability to navigate all these views at once. The rest is communal advocacy. So the more I think we embrace those things, the better. There are some other models I want to briefly mention, then I will finish up. I think we need to have more classes on anti-Semitism. I've taught it at Bard College. I think people get to see anti-Semitism as a subset of Holocaust. I think it's much more, wide and I think informative for, seeing what happened at the Capitol with the Auschwitz, shirts and 6 million was not enough. The more that we have fully integrated interdisciplinary courses on anti-Semitism, and once you get to that point, it's easier to have the discussions about Zionism in Israel. I think there needs to be more of an appreciation teaching about the importance of free speech and academic freedom. I think the campus should strive to be a place that models difficult discussions, not just correct ones. I think we need to promote functional empathy to, encourage people to think of how they would feel if they were born differently. I think some of us did it last summer with George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, and thinking about if we were parents of Black children, how that would feel to us given those circumstances, worried about the police. Those things about Israel and Palestine should be there too. There are a couple of classes, and one I will talk about that I put in the last section that I love. One is it's a simulation on Israel, Palestine, on the Peel Commission that was devised by a person named Natasha Gill, and it's taught in a few places. I first came across it when I saw that the president of J Street U a few years ago was a Pakistani Muslim, and I thought, gee, this is odd. And I found out from a professor at University of Maryland that she had taken the class that was put together this way. And what it is it looks at the conflict from the 1880s to the 1930s, so before the Holocaust, before creation of Israel and Nakba, before contemporary events. And students have to research and be faithful to a figure who participated in the Peel Commission, which is Lord Peel was sent over to do this royal commission to talk to people on Jews and Arabs to figure out, when the Brits had the mandate, what they should do. And Amna spent 8 weeks or so in the skin of David Ben Gurion, and didn't convert her. This isn't conversion therapy, but it was a teaching thing. And she said to me when I talked to her about it, "Do you think that was weird?" She said, "I had an Israeli classmate who had to be the mufti, and as much as a pain in the butt as he was, the guy who was on my side, who's a Jabotinsky figure, was even more difficult to deal with." So, reality. And when I talked to Natasha about it, she said that students would come in saying, "Great, we'll figure out how the Israeli-Palestinian conflict should have been solved." And they come out of it thinking, gee, now we know 80 years after the Peel Commission why it hasn't been solved. And that's the point of education. It's not to make warriors on one side or the other. It's to increase critical thinking. So let me end where I began, with Spokane, because people there realized how nutty this was. And I had connections with all the groups there on the board of a Hate Studies Institute at Gonzaga University. So they invited me to help them figure out how to create a vocabulary to get past this, because they knew they needed to. So I gave them, there were 40 people that were specifically selected. I gave them 80 pages of text, which I'm happy to share with anybody who may want, but they had to promise to read it. And a lot of it at the beginning was the material that I have in the book from Hate Studies, about why we become so enamored with these buckets of us versus them and good and bad, and not challenging our thinking and seeing the complexities. And 3 years later, they're still talking to each other. But in the aftermath of this, it's opened up a lot of capacity. And the thing that I took away from it at the end, which I will always cherish, is one person who was very much of a BDS supporter came up to me and said, I never realized until I understood Jewish history, because I went through a brief survey of Jewish history, why the idea of boycott, but Jews haven't been boycotted so much through their existence, why this resonates so deeply and powerfully with the Jewish community. So that was good. And I had somebody there who was very strong, pro-Israel supporter, who reflected back to me when I said that I had been in a debate over BDS. I was against it, a Palestinian academic was for it. And I said, but you have to engage one of his arguments at least. And his argument was this: at the time of the Second Intifada, people like me and others were saying, come up with a way that's nonviolent to make your case. And regardless of how you feel about BDS, the one thing you could say about it is it's a nonviolent approach. So, there are ways, if people are willing and to step back and to have the intellectual capacity to look at how they're thinking about these things, to have these discussions. And I can't think of a better place to do it than the college campus. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken. And now I'll turn over to Miriam Elman.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much, Dov. And it's a pleasure to be on the panel. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk about your important book, Ken. And let me just say at the outset that Ken is a longtime member of AEN, and we had the pleasure of featuring your book on one of our webinars a few months ago, and we funded some of your programs at the Bard Center of Hate over the years through our microgrants program. So I feel like this is a discussion among colleagues, and in every sense, it is so. So you already gave a really excellent overview of the central themes and arguments of the book. So let me just start by saying that I see your book as a defense of the bedrock principles that should guide the American Academy: academic freedom and free expression. And in the book, anyone who messes with those principles, whether it's off-campus Jewish Zionist organizations that you've worked with for much of your career, or BDS activists, the academic boycotters, the speaker disruptors, they all come in for reproach in your book. Your book is heavily sourced and footnoted. There are excerpts from the 2014 University of Chicago Statement on Free Speech. There's the AUP principles. There's excerpts from US Supreme Court cases. And I think that'll be very helpful for novices and for the uninitiated on what academic freedom and campus free speech really means. The best parts of the book, in my view, are where you describe your frustration with colleagues, sometimes with students, and especially with pro-Israel advocacy organizations, when they run roughshod over the principles of free expression and open inquiry. So we learn of some letters and some statements that you wrote that you reproduce in the book while you were at AJC, but which never saw the light of day because you championed the free speech rights of the other side. And so that was going too far, and you couldn't publish those letters. You share a lot about your own experiences navigating the Israel-Palestine divide, and I'm really glad you started your talk and you opened with that really fascinating early part of the book where we learn about your legal career in Portland in the early 1980s and your first encounter with some virulent anti-Israel activists. And for me, that section, what was most poignant was a conversation you had with a friend who owned a local bookstore. And every book on the shelf was hostile to Israel's very existence. And so you said to your friend who owned the place, what the hell is going on here? And he replied, quote, "Your generation doesn't remember the people coming out of the camps." And that just really stuck with me, that vignette that you provided. You give a really excellent overview of the anti-Israel movement on campus. Most people, even those on the pro-Israel side of the divide, think it originated as a call from civil society organizations in the West Bank. But what you show is the reality is that its origins were in this anti-Semitic hate fest at the UN anti-racism convening in Durban 4 years before it came to the West Bank. And there's, I think, 3 or 4 pages there, just a scathing description of the rank anti-Jewish hatred, what you call an orgy of anti-Israel animus. And you even note that the Durban platform, where the boycott movement was first rolled out, was prepped a few months earlier in Iran. Very few people know that. And so I'm really glad you mentioned it in the book. I also think you're absolutely right that the campuses are not burning. I think that's your phrase. And that most colleges are not hotbeds of anti-Semitism. And it's important to put it into perspective that there are some 4,000 campuses in America. And on most, Israel-Palestine just is not an issue. But on a few dozen and maybe up to some 150 or so, including some of the most prestigious universities and colleges in the country, and those that have high Jewish enrollments, especially on the East Coast, the West Coast, and in the Chicago hub, it is an issue, and that's where your book focuses on. So, like you remarked in your comments, I read your book as a plea for a better way of teaching this conflict, one that recognizes complexity and nuance. And the word complexity, I kept highlighting it because it comes up so much in the book. And you describe lesson plans on how to do the dual narrative approach. And in your chapter on dual narratives, I think you give a great description of Zionism. You self-identify as a Zionist. And, you know, I sort of was thinking about our UK colleague, David Hirsch, who has written extensively on contemporary left anti-Semitism, who describes Israel as, quote, a life raft for the undead of Europe. And I see that that's kind of the way you think of Israel too, sort of a home, a refuge for persecuted Jews who need it in the past and may still need it today. But you also note in that chapter how Zionism plays a key role in religious and cultural identity for most Jews, not all Jews, but most Jews. And so if there's a demand that Jews stop observing Shabbat or stop eating kosher, we'd say that's discrimination. So why should it be any different if there's a demand that Jews disavow their Zionism, which is also a part of the faith for many Jews? And you really talk about that. I mean, it's in one paragraph, but it's sufficient. This notion of chibat Zion, right? The love and attachment that Jews have and the intimate connection with the land of Israel. So I think it's a very sincere depiction of the Jewish-Israeli narrative, but you also provide a really sincere depiction of the Palestinian narrative. And there are others who teach Israel-Palestine that way, who use this dual narrative approach. I feel like I'm one of them. I assign this book, Alan Dowdy's Israel-Palestine, which uses a dual narrative. And he's, by the way, also an AN member. And then Carrie Nelson, in a book we published at AN, Israel Dana, has a whole chapter on a pedagogy of empathy, where you teach poetry classes from a dual narrative perspective. And then there's the phenomenal Rachel Harris, who published this book on teaching and sort of a whole book on this kind of pedagogy. But my question is, you know, how many BDS advocating faculty are willing to teach this way from a dual narrative approach. And a study last year by the IHRA initiative looked at 50 syllabi at 40 US public and private colleges and universities over a 10-year period. And it found that faculty who advocate for the academic boycott of Israel by signing, public petitions, so it's not doing anything surreptitiously, it's just, did you sign something and is it online? We can count you as an advocate of the academic boycott of Israel. And then AMCHA looked at the syllabi of those faculty who endorsed and advocated for the academic boycott and found that on average, 78% of their course readings were authored by fellow BDS supporters. So no dual narrative approach there, not by a long shot. And in a review of Harris's book in the anti-Israel website Manda Weiss, the pro-BDS educator that did that review said her approach in the book is fundamentally flawed. Why? Because the faculty who contributed the chapters want to present both sides in their courses as two equally deserving people when there's only one deserving people that deserves justice and only one side that's legitimate. And, isn't that the fundamental problem here? That for the virulently anti-Israel side of this divide, there's only one way to study Israel, only one way to study the conflict, only one way to study the Middle East. All other ways have to be resisted. And you show that. I mean, you provide in the book the guidelines, the boycott guidelines that were published in 2014, and they're up on the website of PACB, the Palestinian Academic and Cultural Boycott of Israel. It's a blueprint for how faculty can engage in personal boycotts. You work to get events canceled. You shutter study abroad programs to Israel. You don't review dissertations of Israeli graduate students. You don't support events that normalize Israel. And as you point out, Ken, and this is a great quote in your book, you write, campuses are for conversations, but it's hard to have a conversation if you have rules that define merely meeting, merely speaking, merely listening as a form of treachery, the moral equivalent of crossing a picket line. Your book is full of examples of Jewish Zionist students who are being demoralized for their identities. And you note how obnoxious it is, how offensive it is for Jewish students to be told how they can and how they cannot be Jewish on campus. And you give one example of SUNY Stony Brook a couple years ago, where the Students for Justice in Palestine chapter there said to their Zionist peers, you're akin to Nazis, you're the KKK, you're white nationalists, and we want you off the campus. We want Zionists off the campus. We want Hillel off the campus. We want a proper Jewish organization where you can certainly have your Sabbath, but you can't support Israel. So Jews and Judaism are fine, according to Stony Brook's SJP chapter, but only some Jews and only a certain kind of Judaism. On nearly every page of your book, there's another account of a Jewish student being ostracized, marginalized, harassed, or intimidated. And I think it's because of that and because of how powerfully you recount all that in the book that I'm ultimately left puzzled a bit by the central argument, namely that both pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian groups are, quote, pumping steroids in this impulse to censor and suppress speech. I mean, you keep insisting that there's the symmetry, that both sides are acting disrespectfully toward the other. But what you actually show in the book by the weight of all the examples is that there's actually no comparison. There is no academic boycott of Palestinian universities. There are no sets of guidelines to shun Palestinian graduate students or faculty or academic journals. Palestinian students are not having their identities attacked, nor are they being demoralized for their faiths. They do not have their events shut down. Their speakers are not silenced. So, you said you have one fact that over 9 years, 2010 to 2019, there were 120 attempts to disrupt pro-Israel events. Where's the cases? Even a couple on the other side, there is virtually no example of an anti-Israel speaker being silenced at an event by pro-Israel protesters. By and large, the pro-Israel students follow the rules. So we at AAN and many other partner organizations, Stand With Us, Camera on Campus, Israel on Campus, we're documenting this, that there's this pernicious form of anti-Israel activism today that's ranging from efforts to exclude Jewish and Zionist students from participating in progressive coalitions to new, campaigns to discredit the ADL and Hillel. Hillel buildings are being vandalized with Free Palestine graffiti. Jewish students are being told your Zionist beliefs make you unfit for student government. And then there's the faculty. And there are faculty who are writing on social media, publicly, that Zionism is toxifying, that Zionist students should not be welcome on their campuses. There are faculty who are BDS supporting, who are hosting terrorist leaders in their classrooms and in their Zoom webinars. They're glorifying terrorists as role models. There are hundreds of pro-BDS faculty who have publicly stated they won't write letters of reference for students who want to study in Israel. They're proud of that. They don't hide their name on a petition to not write a letter of reference for students. There are academics who give guest lectures where they literally use a black Sharpie to blacken out the bodies and faces of Jewish Israelis because, quote, I can't bear to look at them, kind of dehumanizing, unreal. There are those that concoct wild accusations and delusions that Israel is harvesting organs of Palestinians or stunting the growth of Palestinian children. Then they publish that in university presses and they get tenure and they win awards and they go on lecture circuits. And meanwhile, there's the Zionist faculty, right? Those in this book, and Carrie and you and all the faculty in AAN and in the Alliance of Academic Freedom. And we're all teaching the dual narrative approach, and we aren't demoralizing Palestinian students in our classrooms or on our social media, and we don't have shadow boycotts of Palestinian scholars. These days, there are students and even faculty that are signing petitions, passing resolutions that the ADL in Israel are hurting and harming Blacks in America, holding them responsible for police brutality. And for me, what's so frightening about all that is that here, in the University of California system, and we're at UCLA, so I, raise this example, that this summer there were scores of faculty, graduate students, student organizations that signed the Black Lives Matter petition that essentially scapegoated Jews, that linked American Jewish organizations like the ADL and Israel to serious racial problems gripping our country. There are campuses where Jewish Zionist students cannot participate in causes they care about because they're openly Zionist. So they're hiding that part of their identity and they're scrubbing their resumes clean. And Emory University's Debbie Lipstadt says it's like they've become Marranos, right? Hiding a part of their identity. It's just an astonishing amount of vehemently anti-Israel rhetoric that's crossing the line, that's trafficking in anti-Semitic tropes and images. And we just don't see that kind of in-your-face hostility coming from the pro-Israel side of the divide. Pro-Palestinian students participate in campus life while being proud of their faith, of their identity, of their values. This is exactly as it should be. But increasingly, Jewish Zionist students can't do that. And I think that is the reality. And I actually think, Ken, that your book bears that out. It actually supports that reading of the reality. The primary opponent of reasoned debate and learning about Israel and Palestine on campus is the Bds Movement, whose members shut down discussion, demonize Israel and its supporters, and politicize the classroom. I just have a couple of quibbles, and then I want to take just 2 minutes to talk about IHRA.
Miriam, I want to make sure to give everybody plenty of time for questions. So if you could wrap up.
I will. So let me leave, maybe I'll leave the 2 quibbles for a Q&A or for later, and I'll just get to IHRA because it's like the elephant in the room, right? So some of your recent op-eds in The Guardian and elsewhere, I'm not sure you still stand by the full text in IHRA today, so I'd like to hear about that, but in the book you do. And I think you give a pretty fair reading of IHRA in the book. And you express some concerns about it, how it will be adopted, and should not be a hate speech code on campus, and can't be a panacea, a magic bullet, right? And I think that's all very helpful, and I agree with it. That IHRA is a helpful educational tool for understanding contemporary anti-Semitism and for taking it seriously. Some of the authors of IHRA are a bit upset that your name is now being mobilized by anti-Zionists to attack the IHRA definition. You can talk about that. But in the book, I think you present how it came about, very well, and your role in it. You're not trying to say you're the sole author. Not in the book. You provide other names of people who you work with and so forth. You're absolutely right that IHRA cannot become a formal hate speech code on campus. We discipline action, not speech. We have to distinguish conduct, vandalism, shouting down speakers, assault, persistent pervasive harassment, exclusion from campus life, from constitutionally protected hate speech. But a lot of talk about Israel on campus is anti-Semitic. It does draw on age-old tropes and canards and stereotypes about Jewish greed, bloodlust, sinister power. You show it in spades in the book, and we can't just pretend that isn't anti-Semitic. What we want is university presidents, university chancellors, and leaders to recognize it, to speak out against it, just like they would against protected racist or sexist speech. And in the book, you write that. You write that university leaders must and should speak out. They should exercise their own free speech rights to condemn the hatred, the anti-Israel conspiracy theories, the falsehoods, which on many campuses are targeting students who identify with Israel, even as they may disagree
Miriam,
with
sorry,
one
I'm
or
going to
more
have to, if you can wrap up, I want to make sure we have plenty of time. You've presented a lot of points to Ken, and I want to give him time to respond. And we've also been receiving lots of questions from the audience. I want to make sure everybody in our audience has a chance to at least ask a question. I'll try and present some of them. So Ken, if you would like to respond to some of the points that Miriam raised.
Sure. And the IHRA thing is a sort of a distraction, but as I've written, I think I've been consistent. It was put forward for data collection as the primary purpose, but also for understanding hate crimes, and I've trained on that. And there's more in the book about how that came about, and in my 2006 book. And I've also championed the use of it for diplomatic things. So when somebody says wipe Israel off the map, or the UN is unfair about it, that's an appropriate thing to use it too. I've always been very clear, though, that it was never intended to be a hate speech code. And in terms of the sort of kerfuffle, go back to 2011, Carrie Nelson and I co-authored a piece that talked about using it for education on campus, and I have it in my syllabus, but not to use it as part of this Title VI wave, to do it to suppress speech. And in fact, the AJC at the time that I was there was very happy to identify me as the lead drafter. But leave that as a side, because it's a side issue. Miriam, I agree with you. There are a lot of challenges on some campuses, and you're right, they tend to be on the East Coast and the West Coast. But I would not diminish or put it again in this is a problem, but that's not a problem, or this is where. It's like the debate I used to have when I was at AJC. I had a colleague who was responsible for looking at ISIS and Al Qaeda, or ISIS wasn't there, then Al Qaeda and other groups, and people didn't have the capacity to think it's both that and anti-Semitism on the far right, militia folks and stuff. It's the right and the left. You have to have the capacity to look at all sides. So even though I agree with you of some of these challenges, let me make a couple of points. First, there's no parallel that I know on the Palestinian side that's the equivalent of canary mission, which I find particularly pernicious. The idea that you're going to go after 18, 19-year-old students in particular and say that what they've said about Israel somehow puts them in a position that they should never be employed, and that they're putting out a blacklist. The academic boycott is a blacklist. This is a blacklist and was funded by some heavy hitters in the Jewish community. So there is some pervasive problems there. I've quoted in the book Jewish students who have aligned with the pro-Palestinian cause and have been told, you're not really Jewish, you're a capo, and why are you wearing that kippah? I think Jews we should be a big tent and people could have different positions, but the challenge is that we can't seem to have the conversation. I quote the founder of Open Hillel, says people can get together from different backgrounds for a meal on Shabbat, but not over differences of Israel. And that's part of the problem. Two final points. There was the same challenge about the sort of, I see it as bad teaching as a problem. When I teach about Israel, I tell students I have a point of view, and if you parrot back to me what you think I think, that's the only way you're for sure going to get a bad grade. So I see this as bad teaching more than anything else. But that came up in a meeting at AJC years ago with some college presidents, Arnie Einstein, Yehuda Reinhardt, and some others. And the answer was, people were saying, well, we got to push back against these. I was like, no, we got to increase the capacity to teach about Israel. So that's how the Brandeis Center, which I know Carrie and some others have graduated from, to really get people to know how to teach, not to propagandize, but to have credible people that are going to draw students to increase the teaching about Israel. And that's the way you do it. Finally, I find, like I said, problems on both sides, but there is no effort that I know of somebody to say, let's create a definition of anti-Palestinian animus. And let's say what it would contain. It would say, well, the Palestinian people are a myth, or Palestinians don't have a right to full self-determination. And then let's go police speech on campus. I have a feeling that a lot of people that would agree with you and me, Miriam, about some of the excesses on the other side have probably said things that would be violent of that definition. We don't want to have that happen anymore. As I've written in pieces, one of the things I've always done about bigotry is change the settings and see if the same rules apply. So think in the current moment, if there was a desire to have a definition of anti-Black racism, and it would include perhaps opposition to affirmative action, opposition to the removal of Confederate statues. And if that was used as a way to police what was being said, what was being taught, what was being assigned on a campus, I think we'd have all the problem with that. And using the power of the state, in this case, to me is a challenge. One final thing too, because there's another aspect of it which I do point out in the book, which I think is important for this audience. There's another First Amendment problem. It's the church-state problem. There is a debate inside the Jewish community about how people feel about Israel, and we allow Satmar Jews, by and large, who are anti-Zionists, to be seen as part of the tent. But there are Jews whose idea of Jewishness says that how you treat the stranger is important, and they may come to an anti-Zionist position. That's a debate inside the community. I don't know how it can be solved. I just get scared that the idea that we want the government to solve it for us, to basically say, as Kushner did and Pompeo did, that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, full stop. Sometimes it is, as you said, I reflect in the book and some of the examples, and sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's not about the fact that these are Jews that are there. It's about a fact of perhaps a irreconcilable conflict between two national narratives. So I think there are problems on both sides, and to the extent that we only point to the problems on the other side and not on the problems on our side, I think we're doing the academy a disservice. And I think there's a lack of credibility in a way, because I think you have to. That's why the Alliance for Academic Freedom was founded. The principles say we're calling out against the academic boycott, but we're also supporting the right of people with whom we disagree who want to propose a boycott. You have to be consistent with the free speech principles across the board. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Let me just kind of weigh in here a little bit on I think, the debate as it's emerging, maybe try to sort through some of the positions. It seems that, the first issue, the first kind of division here is over the nature of the problem or the scale of the problem. And Ken, you convey very powerfully in your book, and I think very judiciously and fairly, that this is a problem, what's happening on campus, this toxic environment, is something that affects both pro-Israel students, not only Jewish students, but pro-Israel students more broadly, as well as pro-Palestinian students. And I think Miriam's response is kind of focusing that actually it's really pro-Israel students, and especially Jewish students, who identify with Israel, who are experiencing more severe problems. So one is the nature of the problem and and the degree to which it affects both sides equally, or whether that even matters. The fact is, I think clearly, as you show so well in your book, that there are multiple instances of both pro-Israel students and pro-Palestinian students feeling intimidated because of their politics, because of their views, experiencing even harassment and sometimes threats of violence. Whether that is, how widespread that problem is clearly debatable. Certainly in some contexts is far worse than in others. But that's one part of the debate, the nature of the problem, the scale of it, the severity of it. And then another issue here is the cause of this, like what's driving this. And I think one of the things you hint at in the book, and we haven't yet touched on, is the role of external groups, outside advocacy groups in particular. You kind of suggest in your book that these external groups are in many ways exacerbating this. Sometimes maybe with the best of intentions, but they end up making this problem far worse and really contributing to it. But there's the question of kind of, is this the result of good faith efforts on both sides? In other words, is it that pro-Palestinian students are sincerely protesting, as they see it, Israel's oppressive policies towards Palestinians, the suffering of Palestinians under Israeli occupation, but while sincere in their motives, the effect of their actions sometimes may be to lead Jewish students or pro-Israel students to feel intimidated and harassed. And on the other side, pro-Israel groups and pro-Israel students may genuinely experience these protests against Israel Apartheid Week, divestment as threatening to them, may genuinely experience it as anti-Semitic, and therefore trying to prevent these things from taking place, not necessarily, as the critics suggest, trying to censor or silence speech. In other words, one of the problems I think in this debate has often been the imputation of bad faith or bad motives on either side, each side believing that the other is not acting in good faith, but really is motivated by bad intentions. And so I want to kind of get at the question of the intentions underlying this. And then the third area of debate is the response to it. Okay, given there is a problem, how severe is the problem? What's the reason for it? But the response, and that in part now has often revolved around the adoption of the IHRA definition. But I think, as you do in your book, well, there needs to be a bigger discussion about how to respond to this issue, not one that's solely focused on this one definition, but more broadly, what can universities do, what can faculty members do, and what can external advocacy groups do to kind of try to reduce the temperature on this. So I've tried to lay out, very briefly, these three areas of debate. On the scale, on the severity of the problem, some of the questions that we've had coming in to you, Ken, have pointed out that while it may be true in the United States today, that the problem, at least when it comes to harassment or intimidation of Jewish students or pro-Israel students, is not severe, right? And we can debate that. Miriam has made the case that it's actually very serious. But what about in other contexts, particularly in the UK, for example, where you mentioned that the academic boycott, attempts to academic boycott Israel, originated in the UK. So in many ways, when we're talking about the campus climate, we're not just talking about the US context. And many people have argued that in the UK, the adoption of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, for example, is really seen as necessary because of the kinds of harassment or intimidation or even violence that Jewish students particularly have experienced in the UK. So in other words, I guess I'd like you to talk a little bit about the UK in that context, and more broadly, the severity of the problem. And then the next question we'll get into is, this question of bad faith. In your book, you argue that the IHRA definition has been weaponized, that it's been misused or even abused. I wonder if you didn't explicitly say this. The insinuation is that this was done in bad faith. In other words, that the groups like the ZOA or the Amcha Initiative or others that employ this tactic of threatening to use the Title VI discrimination claims to invest, that they're really not operating in good faith, that this is a misuse of them. Whereas I think they would argue that in fact they are not operating in bad faith, but they genuinely understand these things to be anti-Semitic. In other words, does it help? To what extent is there sincerity of intention? And maybe we should start off by at least believing both sides that their intentions are sincere, even if the effects of their actions may be negative.
Well, there's a lot there. We could probably spend another hour, so I'll just pick a couple of points, and I want Miriam to respond and leave time for Q&A too. So, I think it's a question of zealousness. I think on both sides, everybody, and there are lots of examples I have in the book where everybody feels the justice of their situation, and it's really simple. I mean, Miriam was talking about, I do use the word complexity. One of the people who I think is on one side of it said I had a complexity complex as I was writing about the book, but I think it is complex and people try to reduce it to simple things. And if you believe that this is an absolute just thing, you're fighting for your people and you're fighting for what's true and you're fighting for what's right, then it's a political battle. It's not an academic battle. I think that, that becomes, a passionate one. And I think there are issues in the UK that are, perhaps more systemic and long-term, but I don't think the solution is any different. I mean, there's a different there in terms of free speech and First Amendment and so forth, but universities are universal and academic freedom is important. And I, first started getting into the concern about some anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism on campus back in the days between 75 and 91, when the UN declared that Zionism was a form of racism. It wasn't adopted as an official resolution by, folks, but it was there and it was used. And one of the things that startled me was in the UK, that people were saying, if you're a Jew, you're a Zionist, you're a Zionist, you're a racist. The racist student groups are not allowed, and there were Jewish student groups that were not allowed. So taking that equation and turning it into campus policy, we saw the discriminatory effect. What I worry about now in the UK, and I've written about this, is the flip side. We want to institutionalize a statement that says anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, full stop. And when you talk to Jewish faculty and Palestinian faculty, they see the threat, the same threat that I talked about as a hate speech code. So I think that is a problem. One of the other, I'll talk about two other quick things. You raised about external groups. I think that is a problem on all sides. So outside groups see that this is a place they want to fight a battle, and frequently they leave the people there that are dealing with it on the ground with messes to clean up that they don't. And I think that's just a question of irresponsibility. They may feel justified in that, but they don't do the due diligence. And one of the things I'm proud the Alliance for Academic Freedom is that we find out who's on the campus there that can give us some of the details. Like one story I tell in the book, that back when Columbia was a big issue for the time back in the early 2000s, there was an investigation that the university did about some Joseph Mossad and some others, and the organized outside Jewish community, for the most part, AJC thankfully was an exception, blasted the university because the people on that committee to investigate him were people that had signed the divestment, and some were his thesis advisors and so forth. And I remember talking to a very identified Jewish Zionist faculty member who said, wait a minute, this is a question about somebody's a bad teacher. Do you mean if I signed the anti-divestment petition, I'd be disqualified from serving on this thing too? So there's that outside groups do make messes. And I think there's a larger issue too that I do explore in the book. There's a push, and this comes mostly from the left, for saying that the campus ought to be a place with safe spaces, trigger warnings, and concern about microaggressions. And this, as I write in the book, there's some internal logic to some of this. And the tension is you want students to feel comfortable on campus, otherwise they're not going to be free to experiment and be wrong in their ideas. So that's the eternal tension. But this is trying to say this is groupthink. And what's problematic to me is that when you look at some of the groups that are pushing using the definition on the campus, they're making the same argument. They're saying protect Jewish students from hearing these things. I remember going to Bar years ago when there was a very active pro-Palestinian group there, big banner on the front of Stone Row, which is the huge, the oldest dorm in the center of the campus, said Free Palestine. Did it make me feel uncomfortable? Yeah, because I knew that some of what was, behind it. But then I thought, this is a campus and it's an opportunity to talk about those things. And I really believe that if you're not made discomforted, that's a problem. If there's anti-Semitism there that's expressed, just like if there's racism or sexism or homophobia, you use the opportunity to get people to talk about it, as some of the people at AEN have done. And you use it as a teaching opportunity, but you make the distinction between harassment and intimidation and discrimination on one side, and expression, even if you find the expression to be hateful. Because when you start allowing government in particular to define which is hateful and which isn't, is anti-Zionism hateful? Is it not always hateful? If I were a Palestinian born in 48 and I'm an anti-Zionist, does that make me hateful? Once you start letting people define what can be said and what you can't, the university ceases in many important ways to be a university.
So thank you. So one of the questions we've had coming in, following up from this, I mean, in your book, you make and you just did a kind of resolute defense of free speech and of academic freedom. And I think the criticism that has come in, or one of the questions that's come in, is that should there be limits, right? What about, is it possible, or what about circumstances where freedom of speech or academic freedom can lead to people feeling intimidated or harassed? In other words, where do we draw the line from, the absolute defense of free speech to a recognition that sometimes a professor having academic freedom could lead a student to feel intimidated, or protests based upon free speech can lead to students feeling harassed? And one of our students at UCLA raised this about Israel Apartheid Week, for example, and that can lead students to feel intimidated, pro-Israel students or Israeli students on campus, or Jewish students, to feel to feel threatened or intimidated.
A campus is a place for bringing in ideas. Invitations, speakers and so forth does not mean endorsement. Students have a right to do an Israel Apartheid Week, and I would think a Palestinian student might be feel intimidated or marginalized if somebody from ZOA or had a very far right view on Israel, and so the Palestinian people were a myth. I think Black students are, concerned sometimes in some places when a Charles Murray comes in, who talks about genetics as part of one of the things associated with intelligence. A campus is a place where you have to welcome ideas and then expect people to push back. I'll give you one example of a controversy I was involved in years ago, where somebody wanted to invite in a Ku Klux Klan member to speak. And as you might imagine, everybody was saying, how could you do this? It's going to make people feel intimidated. They're going to be frightened. Look at what the Klan has done. And ultimately, they had the session off campus, but it was allowed to continue. Why was the person invited in? It was a journalism class. What was the reason? The journalism teacher wanted to teach the students, how do you interview a white supremacist? And I can tell you, having been involved in the pushback when David Duke looked like he was going to get elected to Congress, and was, might get elected to Congress and was running for governor before that. The journalist did not know how to deal with it. They would ask him a question and he'd give a flip answer and it was charming, and then move on to something else. So the importance of learning about these ideas is really important. One of the other things I said in the book is, look, Ahmadinejad came to Columbia. Did Lee Bollinger want to have him come? Probably not. Who needed that grief? But you could hear firsthand what he had to say, and he was totally, shamed by what happened there. He said these anti-gay things that became a Saturday Night Live skit and a cover of the New Yorker. You don't have to let things just be. There is one of the things I put in the book too. There were students who were complaining about Steve Bannon speaking on a campus. And, I suggested to them, do what I did with a group in Montana where they had neo-Nazis come and march, or wanted to march and intimidate the Jews and human rights activists in Western Montana. I said, make a disincentive, do a fundraiser tied to how long they act. So I would say, do a fundraiser when Bannon comes and have it go to, lawyers for children of immigrants. So if you don't like somebody doing Israel Apartheid Week, do a fundraiser. But the longer they go, the more you want to give to the IDF or something. You can find other ways rather than just suppressing speech.
So Miriam, I wonder if you would agree with this, free speech approach. And just to give you both an example to consider, which has been in the news, the Zoom cancellation of these webinars featuring Layla Khalid, Palestinian hijacker, member of Palestinian terrorist organization. That's one area in which we can see this debate playing out. Do you think it was right for Zoom, or do you have concerns about Zoom kind of banning a webinar like this, or deplatforming, I suppose is the term?
It's a great example, and Ken, that AAN works all the time with Alliance for Academic Freedom to promote free speech on campus. We're incredibly committed. And this example is a great one because we were very involved, actually, at San Francisco State at the response. And the suggestion we had, and this was before Zoom on its own as a private company decided, according to our terms of use, we did not want to platform a member of a US designated terror organization. And they had the right to do that as a private company. But before we knew that, when there was still the debate about whether the two faculty member would hold the open classroom and feature a PFLP leader, Layla Khalid, on this open Zoom call, we suggested to the campus that they do a counter event, a counter speech event at the time, which actually became the vigil that was held for commemorating and memorializing the victims of PFLP. And actually, President Lynn Mahoney came to the vigil and spoke. And so that is something that university leaders can do. They don't shut down the alternative speech. This happened also at Northwestern when Rasmia Odeh was brought by SJP. And the president there also did not shut that down, but he went and stood with those students who were counter-protesting as a vigil for that. So you want to showcase and highlight better speech to bad speech. And that's something that you would do with faculty, right? So faculty have academic freedom to present the material the way they see fit. That's what academic freedom means. And students do have to be put in a position where they may not feel entirely comfortable, right? And then they can write an op-ed about why they didn't feel comfortable. And they can present another alternative in class. What the faculty member can't do is shut down that alternative. Now, sometimes when you might have a syllabus where there's only material on one side, and it isn't this sort of dual narrative that you support, Ken, there may not be a wherewithal for students to ask an alternative question. They don't actually have the material. It's also entirely appropriate for a university leader, a dean, a chair to say to a particular faculty member, you know, you should be teaching a different course. No faculty member has the academic freedom to decide which courses they teach. And having taught for a number, you know, sometimes you have to follow what your chair says. BDS advocates on campus, whether it's students, whether it's faculty, they have the free speech rights to advocate, just like Jewish Zionist students do, right? So they can platform. And they also don't have the free speech right to be free of criticism. So that's something we often hear from, you know, the faculty who are publishing, right? That you've taken away our academic freedom because you wrote a critical piece on my book. No, you know, you don't have the right to be free of criticism. And that's a little bit sort of where I take a little issue with you on Canary Mission, and that people are going to post things online on public and social media, you know, and someone finds and wants to criticize it. Okay, you know, I'm not in favor of blacklists. I don't think that's appropriate, but the Institute for the Study of Global Terrorism, ISCAP, has a 100-page document of all public social media of various SJP chapters. And, you know, it's the weight of the sort of, here's what you're doing. You're trafficking in anti-Semitic tropes and canards. Can you do pro-Palestinian activism in a different way? In a way that doesn't besmirch someone else's identity, right? In a way that actually is pro-Palestinian, but not anti-Semitic at the same time. And for about 10 years, that's what I did at SU. I was sort of working with Palestinian students and Israeli Jewish students to find that kind of programming. We brought Seeds for Peace, right, to campus at 100 students in the auditorium. They're thirsty to see that collaboration, that sort of that coming together to find new methods of engagement and new modes of engagement.
So thank you. I think where both of you seem to agree then is that taking a kind of censorship or suppressing academic freedom or freedom of speech isn't the right response to this issue, and that on both sides, you know, even when anti-Semitism arises, or conversely when Islamophobia arises, as it does during this debate, unfortunately, the best response, it seems, is especially in an educational setting, education. That, in other words, it's really about not trying to you know, ban these kinds of conversations and these kinds of debates or events, but rather try to actually engage with the groups who are involved, and the students particularly, and even when, you know, when they may make comments that are anti-Semitic or Islamophobic, the response again should be one to kind of point this out, educate, engage, rather than shame or silence or censor. And I think that's a very important point. Just I want to give you kind of a final word on this. You know, going forward, it seems that while we, the three of us, are believers in free speech and the importance of academic freedom, we're at a time, not just in the academy, but more broadly in this country and even in the democratic world in general, where this value seems to be challenged on both sides by conservatives and liberals. I mean, we just, you know, in the news has obviously been the Twitter's ban on former President Trump, and which has raised questions about the role of private organizations and corporations in banning speech. Is the trend, as you see it, away from freedom of speech? I mean, are we in some ways fighting a losing battle here? Because what we seem to hear, and it's coming through in the questions from students, is that they see free speech as not the highest value, but rather safety or security or preventing violence or preventing it. In other words, is it us perhaps who need to really reckon with the fact that nowadays, unlike in the past where freedom of speech was widely recognized, this is a value under attack, and what can we do about that and going forward? And if you could just give me a very short answer, because we're out of time, but I think it's
I think freedom of speech, academic freedom, at least in the U.S., First Amendment are all important values. And if you look historically, and as I put in the book, I mean, there were times World War I, the faculty, were told you had to have support the war, the McCarthy era. And I think that there are people that have written that, some folks who are now younger who didn't go through the experiences that I did, seeing the battle for free speech was a battle that was intertwined intrinsically with the battle for civil rights and the ending of the Vietnam War and ending apartheid. And, you even see with Black Lives Matter today as some of the pushback. If you walk down the road that's saying there's certain speech I don't like, and I don't want to be bothered to counter it, I want somebody to suppress it, government will always suppress the speech the government doesn't like, not the speech that you or I don't like. And I think that's, that's one of the lessons of the book too. I think that people need to, on campuses, have a better appreciation for the history of academic freedom, what a precious place the academy is, and the importance of being able to look at ideas and be wrong and to move on and think about how you're going to spend the rest of your life being challenged by ideas. If we see that as our goal, I think we'll be in a much better place.
Thank you. I just want to thank you both, not only for the insights and that you provided in this very contentious issue, but also for modeling a kind of conversation, a dialogue, which unfortunately, as you both know, is not happening enough in the academy today. And I want to thank you for that. I should also point out that the Nazarian Center, myself personally, made a lot of efforts actually to invite somebody to speak for the pro-Palestinian perspective or for the other perspective, realizing that that was an important voice and perspective. Unfortunately, despite our efforts to invite somebody to speak and to appear alongside Miriam and Ken, for one reason or another, and we can only speculate, we didn't succeed. Whether that was a micro boycott or not, I do not know. But clearly that is an important perspective as well. And I regret the fact that we weren't able to do that. And I think that in and of itself maybe is indicative of some of the challenges that we all face in really trying to have an open and honest and civil discussion about these very contentious subjects. So thank you, Ken and Miriam. I want to thank all of our audience. This recording will also be available online in a couple of days. And I know you had lots of other questions that we didn't have time to get to. Ken and Miriam have both very graciously said that they would be happy to answer questions that you have by email. I won't give out the email addresses, but you're welcome to write to the Nazarian Center and we will forward them on to Ken and Miriam. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Ken and Miriam, so much. And see you all next time. Thanks. Goodbye.
Thank you both so much. Thank you all.